Now, this is going to be kind of an interesting review because I kind of said when I finished this that, like, Ys is now my favorite JRPG series, and I meant it. You know, I like this, I think, more than Dragon Quest, more than Final Fantasy, more than Atelier, more than, like, I don't know, anything else I've been playing lately. I can't think of any other JRPG franchise that's gone on this long and remained this high quality. Even Dragon Quest seems like it's falling off in recent years, but Ys seems like one of those franchises that is just oozing style, oozing substance, has just a long history of just these insanely high-quality titles, and unfortunately, because of the nature of these games, they haven't really become mainstream, to the point where, like, a lot of people have never even really heard of them, and that is a complete shame. These are, in my opinion, the best action RPGs on the market, with just incredibly fast-paced gameplay, great environments, great storytelling, great artwork, and just all around just emphasize everything I love about the genre. In a lot of respects, this is kind of what I always wanted Kingdom Hearts to be. You know, focusing more on, like, mature adult storytelling that, you know, really emphasizes the adventure instead of just being melodramatic, just the same thing over and over and over again slop that Kingdom Hearts essentially devolved into. Like, Ys is fast, it's intense, it has a lot going on, it's innovated more over the years. Like, it is very unfortunate that Ys has never taken off in the West, but it is my goal as Harmon Smith, you know, gaming's greatest Nintendo YouTuber, to talk about how much Ys deserves to succeed on Nintendo platforms. Ys 8, which originally released on the PlayStation Vita, I believe in 2012, is actually one of my favorite third-party games on the platform, and really should be celebrated as, like, a hallmark example of just what makes the JRPG so great. You know, it's just a shining example of just an obscure game, you know, re-releasing on Nintendo consoles and just finding a new audience of people who will just lap this stuff up. It's just been really, really amazing seeing more Nintendo fans getting into Ys and advocating for it, and it is definitely something I'm all for. You know, I've played like 3 of these games now. I've played Ys 8, Lacrimosa of Dana, you know, 10 out of 10, Kino, masterpiece, go play it right now. I've played Ys Origin, which is a better version of this, actually, which I actually recommend you pick up before this, and I've played this. You know, I've also played the demo to Ys 10, which I haven't bought yet, and I'm halfway through Ys 9, which unfortunately has a lot of problems that led me to not finishing the game. I do intend on going back and finishing it eventually, but at the moment, like, Ys 9 remains unfinished, and I'm going to try and get back on that because I really do need to do it. But yeah, like, in general, like, I've played enough Ys to tell you that, like, I am very, very enthusiastic about this franchise. I think it has a very bright future ahead of it. It's everything we love about anime and Japanese, like, adventure storytelling. It's so good. And Ys Memoire is a pretty solid game. You know, it is the weakest Ys game I've ever played. But the fact that, like, this is, like, the worst Ys game I've personally played and still enjoyed it this much is very telling about how much I love these games and their general formula. You know, the idea of Adol going to a new location that's been foreshadowed before in other games, and, like, you know, uncovering some deep, dark conspiracy and getting involved in the characters there and going on some crazy adventure. It never gets old. It's such a good formula. The game really does have that kind of, you know, One Piece or Gulliver's Travels vibes, where you always go to a new location and meet completely different characters with their own perspectives and personalities and crazy backgrounds and leading into some crazy conclusion. It never gets old for me. You know, every time I see this, it's just it's incredible just how varied and unique the world of Ys actually is. It probably is one of the best, like, overarching storylines I've seen in any Japanese RPG ever, because usually they don't follow the same character across like, an entire established world. But Yeast does that really well, to the point where like I honestly kind of consider Adol Kristen, the protagonist of these games, to be like one of my favorite video game characters now, because he's just so likable. It's really impressive to see. But Yeast Memoire, like I said this several times when I was playing through the game, that if I wasn't such a big fan of Yeast, I probably wouldn't have finished it, because this game doesn't really strike you the same way that like some of the other Yeast games do, right? The environments aren't as good, the story isn't as elaborate, the characters aren't as likable, there isn't as many like crazy plot twists, the writing isn't as good, the environments aren't as fleshed out or fun to explore. It can be kind of repetitive and grindy. It's kind of short. You get through the entire thing in about 10 hours. Like Yeast Memoire is like the worst Yeast game I've played, and yet still encompasses everything I love about the franchise. So, like, I wouldn't recommend this as a first-time entry. I would recommend Yeast 8 over this. I would recommend Origin. But, like, I would recommend Yeast 10 even, because the demo for that is, that's actually a prequel to some of these games. So, like, Memoire just feels like one of those games that you kind of have to have a little bit of knowledge of the Yeast franchise and, like, the story to really get invested in. Because, like, this one's about, like, Adol and Dogi going back to Dogi's hometown of Redmont. And, like, reuniting with his childhood friends and so forth. Now, if you don't know who Dogi is, if you haven't been around this character for so long and understood that like he's Adol's sidekick to these games, like you wouldn't be invested in this plot line, right? But like if you play Yeast 8 and like understand how great Dogi is and how much he does for you and like what great pals you are, like it's really cool and exciting to kind of like see where he came from and like see a little bit of context as to like his origin story and like why he's traveling with Adol and so forth. Like it's a really interesting like look into his character and his background, even though, unfortunately, like always, he doesn't really do all that much in the story. Dogi's a really weird character because, like, he's always present and yet somehow is never there for the critical story moments. It's kind of insane if you like think about it for even a minute, like just how little Dogi actually accomplishes in the story, in spite of like this being involving his childhood friends. But that's kind of what makes it interesting. That's kind of what makes Adol such a great character, is that like he's not directly invested in everything that goes on, but he's still like fundamentally a good person and travels to like new parts of the world and gets involved in like crazy like adventures that really have nothing to do with them. It's just great. It's fantastic. So with like Oath and Felghana, I do think like the primary issue with it as an experience is that like it is very basic Yeast. I would say this is the most basic plot I've ever seen out of a Yeast game, because usually they have some like crazy twist or like like way more characters, but this one is pretty straightforward, like by Yeast standards, where like you have a town that's being beset by a corrupt lord. And you're going around getting into all these conflicts with like monster attacks, and you uncover some conspiracy to like uncover some ancient god that's buried under the ground, and it eventually escalates to the point where you have to fight the god at the end. It's pretty standard JRPG stuff, but like the thing that really makes like Yeast excel at this is like how much effort it goes to like kind of ground the setting, where it actually does give like a lot of the minor characters like fun designs. They have a lot of distinct personalities. They help you. They're trying to be invested in you. Like you're the hero, but like you do feel the sense of like this community, like, and its struggles. And it's very basic by Yeast standards, but it very much works. Like, I kind of had myself, like, shocked at the end, like, realizing how invested I was in the town and its fate, even though this is like a 10-hour RPG. Like, they could have done a lot more with it. There are, like, 5 areas total? Like, none of them very long, none of them that complex. I think you go back to the mines twice. Because, like, there's some other place you don't go to the first time you're down there. But, like, other than that, the game is, like, shockingly just simplistic with its level design and its environments. And, like, when it comes to its basic enemy designs, it's, like, it doesn't really feel as if, like, they were able to realize the full concept. And I found myself thinking this when I was playing this, that, like, oh, wow, I wonder what this game would look like if it was remade. I bet they could do a whole lot more with the idea, and this could be expanded. They could do a lot more with this. That sounds like a really interesting idea. And then I looked it up, and I realized that this actually is a remake of Yeast 3, which I somehow never actually picked up on when I pre-ordered the game. Like, they didn't advertise it. I had no idea. Like, I thought this was a spin-off. So the fact this is a remake of Yeast 3, which is actually like a side-scrolling action game in the vein of Zelda 2, like, that is really interesting to me. And I kind of wish, like, it's kind of crazy that they put so much effort in remaking the game, and yet it still feels as if it doesn't really exist on the same level as other Yeast games. And that is kind of disappointing to a certain extent. But, like, at the same time, when you see, like, when they completely change the genre and the way the game is played, it kind of makes sense. Like, I don't know. It's definitely an interesting question, like, how much you change, especially when, like, I've never played Yeast 3. So for me, I find myself, like, wondering, like, well, were these changes, like, for the better or for the worse, or, like, what have you? For me, like, I enjoyed, like, every moment of this game. Like, I truly, genuinely did. But, like, at the same time, I have to, like, stop and, like, acknowledge the reality. Like this is not as good as any of the other Yeast games I finished. Even Yeast 9, like, Yeast 9 has a lot of problems, but they don't become prevalent until, like, about 10, 15 hours in. Like, until that point, I thought, like, Yeast 9 was, like, better than 8 in a lot of ways, because I love the setting so much more and, like, the new characters. It was way more appealing to me than, like, Yeast 8's, like, initial setup and plot. But, like, it just didn't go anywhere with it after a certain point. So, like, Memoire just doesn't... It seems so much less ambitious than, like, so many of the other Yeast games I've played. And I'm so disappointed by that, but I suppose they were very much limited by, like, the fact that it was a remake and, like, how much they wanted to change or keep, or, like, what they wanted to do. I do find myself, when I finish the game, like, that was a great experience. Like, that's how I felt, like, playing through this game, like, going through the grind and, like, getting all the best equipment and fighting the boss at the end, like, the boss fights in this game are actually really good. Nowhere near as good as, like, what you typically see out of Yeast, but, like, they're still really, really good. Way better than most other RPG bosses, actually, still. So, like, yeah, again, with all this game's problems, its length, its simplistic nature, the poor, like, the average level design, like, the simplistic, like, it is still Yeast, and I think that, like, really just goes to show you just how much I love these games, that this game, I loved it this much in spite of all of its problems. Like, this is one of my favorite things right now, and I hope Falcom continues to support Nintendo consoles with new releases of Yeast games.